Hello, today I'm going to show you how I brush painted and created my own adjustable acrylic washes on this US M4A3 Sherman in 1/48 scale by Hobby Boss. There are a variety of acrylic colors to choose from different brands. The main one I recommend is Viejo, Light Color, and Citadel for beginners. Cheap synthetic brushes are recommended for doing basic brush painting skills. Next, I brush paint on this acrylic polyurethane surface primer. This Viejo surface primer is excellent for brush painting on any models. Before you prime the model, you should clean it with isopropyl alcohol or with soapy water. Make sure you let it cure for a full day. Next, I use US Olive Drab from Viejo as my first layer of base coat. I've added 8 drops of US Olive Drab and 2 drops of water to get a smooth, milk-like consistency. You must apply the acrylic paint in several thin layers to build up the full opacity of the paint. Never use the paint straight from the bottle, as visible brushstrokes will be seen on the model. Keep in mind, as you apply these thin layers of paint, never go back and retouch the paint, as it will irritate the paint and ruin the consistency. Notice how the paint seems brighter when wet and darker when dry. You must have patience when building up these thin layers, as it will eventually seem like it was airbrushed. Next, I chose green-brown to help brighten the olive drab, as olive drab was known to fade into a grayish tone or into a yellowish tone. I then applied the faded olive drab into the upper areas of the model to where the sun will be aiming down on top of. As the paint still dries, I wipe off excess paint from the brush and moisten it with water to then stump the upper areas of the wet paint. As with this technique, you want to try to keep it random but also sort of controlled into the upper areas. And when you look at historical photos of these vehicles, their paint is faded and discolored in many different ways. You may also fade this olive drab paint with a dark yellow or with a light tan color that will help brighten the olive drab. As we want to keep the colors discolored and random, you want to apply this in upper areas and into different parts where the model may be faded. I had decided to push the contrast a little bit by using olive green and green brown mixed together to help add vibrant colors to the model. Of course, it is your model and you can choose to have it more realistic or more color vibrant. Again, doing the same process as before, we add it to the upper areas to where the light will be reaching the top of the model. Do not be afraid to add lighter areas to the model, as later on in the weathering process, it will be darkened. Notice how we try to keep the areas smooth and transparent as we build up these thin layers to make a nice smooth transition. If it is your first time painting a model, do not bother with historical accuracy or with the right colors, as you will learn these basic skills over time as you learn through the process. Another technique to add on these thin paints is to tap on little dots in areas to where the paint will fade and keep the lower areas darker from what they are. As the paint is still drying, I still have time to take a wide flat moistened brush to then blend in those colors. Still adding to the main highlights of the upper areas of the model, I use the gray tone to help stick out certain areas of the model. The kit came with a nice variety of decals, as I chose the classy peg and cartoon dog for my selection. To help the decals adhere to the model, I use Microsol setting solution, as the decals will conform to the surfaces of the model when it dries. Luckily, these decals were excellent from Hobby Boss, as they were nice and easy to apply on and had no trouble fitting onto the surface. To remove excess Microsol, I use a cotton bud to press onto the surface of the decal to remove any excess solution. As the decal settles into the paint, if you are unhappy with its position, you may flood it with water to be able to move it into a different position. To remove decals from its paper, you want to flood the surface with water and wait until the water has uplifted the decal from the film. After a few minutes of letting the water settle onto the decal, I am easily able to uplift the decal from its film. Some decals you may come across are either thicker or thinner than others, and in this case, these decals were excellent from Hobby Boss. To help the decal not stand out from the paint of the model, I add a green filter to help it blend in. You may skip this stage if you know you are planning to have this model weathered into a certain liking of yours. Notice how the decal film is obvious and present on the model. Later, I will show you that you will not need a clear varnish before the model, and rather something else. I will be using this Viejo vinyl acrylic resin matte medium, which is basically just clear binder paint. As with the acrylic paint, you want to apply this in thin layers and build up the matte effect and to get rid of that film from the decal. After applying several layers of this matte medium, you will see that the clear film parts are very hard to see. Next, I will show you by using this XF57 buff acrylic paint from Tamiya. Here I will show you that making a washable acrylic wash with just soap and water. In this demonstration, I'm using hand soap from a pump and also mix the water and soap together before applying the buff paint in with the mix. Continue mixing these ingredients together as you want a nice consistency as before with your acrylic paint. To make sure the paint reaches all corners of the model, I add more soap to help it. Adding this light dust wash will help accentuate the corners and deeper areas of the model. If your model is a brighter color, you may want to switch to a more darker brown wash to help bring out the details. By also applying this light wash, I make the model brighter than what it originally was. Notice how the soapy water helps the paint reach the deeper corners and crevices of the model. As with acrylic paints, you may want to apply this in lighter layers as before. Just remember, when creating this mix, you want to have more soap than paint, otherwise you will struggle to remove this excess paint when it dries. Now we can begin to remove the excess paint and leave the rest of the paint into the deeper areas of the details. You don't have to wait for the paint to dry. As you can see, we can easily remove it from the model, as Tamiya paints are known to dry quick and fast than in comparison to Vallejo, Citadel, or Life Color paints. As you can see, I use a moistened cotton bud to remove this excess paint, and even after when it dries, it is still just as easy to remove due to the soapy water. You could say this is the first stage of the weathering process and leaves a nice dusty color on the model. I then mix these two Tamiya paints together in equal parts using the same process as before, mixing the soapy water with the paints and leaving it in a nice dark brown color. Next, I brush paint on metal details of the model with rubber black, as the Tamiya paint color was already pre-mixed with isopropyl alcohol within the bottle. To get a nice realistic gunmetal sheen, I used just a regular number 2 pencil on the outer areas of the model. To create a nice first layer superficial chipping, I used these two colors together, and both 2 drops of olive drab and both 2 drops of Iraqi sand to help brighten the color. I then add 1 drop of this AK retarder to help the paint dry slower. You want the paint to be almost translucent in color, as when you brush paint it on, it will be stark at first, but then be dark when it dries. A fast and easy technique is to break apart a piece of sponge and dip it into the mixed chipping paint to get nice, quick and easy superficial chipping. Be careful when you dip the sponge into the paint, as you do not want to collect any excess on the sponge, as adding on the excess amount of paint will not look like random specks of chipping. To get finer lines of detail in chipping, you want to use a thinner brush that has nice fine bristles to help you brush paint on the chips. You want to lightly tap on these chips from the sponge, as you do not want to leave on large chips on the model. Over time, you will build up this effect on the model with each light coat of chipping. You may also choose to lighten this chipping color by adding more Iraqi sand to the mix. If you have messed up one of your chips to be too large, you may use a toothpick to gently scrape off the excess paint. Next, I use this German camouflage black brown from Panzer series to get a nice deeper chips on the model. If you do not own this color, you want to mix black and brown together with a hint of red. I then mix buff and flat earth in equal parts together to get an even more nice different tone within the dust. Again, with the same method of mixing soapy water with paint allows me to retouch the areas for later. As you can see, I am easily able to retouch the areas of the surface on the dusty layer with a moistened flat brush. Just remember that weathering is a subjective artistic style, and you can either choose to leave the model weathered or even more clean. I then decide to mix these three paints to get a nice sandy color. I then use this Loctite super glue to help connect together the rubber tracks. Luckily, the rubber tracks fitted well together with the super glue, as they did not fall short in length. I used the same previous sandy color mix and to use it to weather on the tracks. Next, I used these Ford vehicle paints to paint the stowage. The kit came with a nice variety of stowage to choose from. As you can see, they give you a numerous amount of bags and items. I really enjoyed weathering the model, as the final results left me a very pleasing result. As within this hobby, you want to make sure to first please yourself with the model rather than others. I'd like to thank you for watching, and please let me know what you think in the comments below.